Okay, Gobi Society, welcome. This is Gobi Society's very first live, just myself. And my little daughter was adorable. She wrote me a little note that said, "Mommy, good luck. Just because you don't do water slides doesn't mean you can't be brave. Go outside of your comfort zone." So this is outside of my comfort zone. But the truth is, it's not just my comfort zone that we're currently going out of, but many of you are in the midst of possibly having a snow day tomorrow, most likely, plus the idea of going back to school after a vacation. So all of those things together, I decided that it was worth going outside of my comfort zone to be able to speak and to really get some tips and tools and conversation going about how to reboot our system in going back to school. And so many of you gave me your information and your questions and your comments. So I am going to try my very best to get to as many of them as possible. And please keep on sending information, because that way your questions and your comments will make me feel like I am not violating one of the rules of people, which is do not talk to yourself in public. So if it's an engagement, then that'll be much easier. So let's start. What can we do to reboot our system before going back to school? So I have a mnemonic, and the mnemonic is shock. We shock the system. Before I go into that, people keep on asking me, like, why is it that I use mnemonics? Why is it that I kind of combine things into a cute, one word? And my answer is, in that way, we can remember. We are all very busy. We're working mommies of many children, mommies with responsibilities, parents, grandparents. And if I can somehow have that trigger word, then it goes a long way. So in the moment, we can really remember what it is that we're supposed to be remembering. So what does shock stand for? So the S of shock is sleep. Now, many of you know that sleep is important, but I want to understand with you some of the dynamics of it. So first of all, if you are overtired or over any feeling, over worried, if you're frustrated, if your emotional self is high up, then your problem solving self is going to be way down. That's just the way the brain works. So in fact, if I am highly tired, then I'm not going to be my best self when it comes to problem solving. And why is that important when I'm rebooting my system? Well, in general, many of us come to terms and we're like, wait a second, that wasn't my best response. I could have done better. Or, oops, I got very angry very quickly. So if we give ourselves 2 seconds, then we can come up with a better answer. And so our better answer is going to come when we are less emotional, right? So if we're less emotional, we have better problem solving. So if I'm going into a reboot system where I'm going to have and need better problem solving and just being in a better place mentally, then I am going to want to be less emotional. And one of those very tough emotions for ourselves and for our children is tired. So it really does make sense for me to try my best to get more sleep and to try to get my children to be more rested. Now, how do we do that? Obviously, okay. So first of all, consistency is a very important thing. Our bodies get used to a certain pattern when we do it more than once. My rule is the rule of 3. So if we can get a pattern going 3 times, then the natural process inside of us kick in. So if we can really stress, let's say, a certain bedtime going forward for one night, then another night, by the 3rd night, it's already getting easier. And so for our children, it really does make sense to try very hard to keep to a consistent schedule, whatever that might be. And over vacation, most of us did not do that. And so trying to get back into that routine is a really important thing. There is a fundamental rule, and it happens to be, it's not my rule, but for those parents that do allow their children to engage in TV, videos, electronics, the brain does not do its best sleeping when it's involved up to an hour. So if you're going to set, let's say 9 o'clock as the time for your children, then 8 o'clock would probably be the best cutoff so that the natural process that happens with their sleeping can kick in. And why is that important? So it's important to perhaps cut off an hour before your children. You want their targeted time for a variety of reasons. So the first is what I just said. There's the blue light, and I'm not scientific, so I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly why, but the brain just keeps on functioning much, much more if your child is engaged in electronics. And that's really the same for you also. So if you're trying to unwind, and you might say to yourself, okay, listen, I'm so tired that it's not even going to matter, but it would be in your best interest to also try to not be on your phone or just be engaging electronically up to an hour before you're going to go to sleep. There's another reason for that. And that is, let's say your children, you're going to have to fight with them over going to sleep. So it really makes a lot more sense for you to be not going up against their electronics. And what do I mean by that? So essentially, if they're bored, they're going to be more likely to go to sleep than if they're involved in an electronic, a video game, or a TV show. So if you are going to be struggling with it, then it would probably make more sense to try to insist an hour before, so that during that dull time, they will get more tired and they have nothing else to do. So hopefully they'll be able to go to sleep earlier. And then finally, if this really is an important value to you, then you're going to really push the sleep, then that would be something that you're going to be involved when it comes to a reward system. And we'll get into that later. But the things that matter to us are the things that we reinforce, the things that we stress. And so bottom line is, if you're more rested, you're much more able to reboot. If your kids are more rested, they're better able to function with all of what's going to be asked of them later on in, now that vacation is over. So sleep really is a very important piece. Now the H, okay? So the H is hooks. What are hooks? So hooks are a variety of different things, and I'm going to tell you. Hooks mean what grounds you. And in one way, a lot of parents tell me, or they ask me, and we talk about how, it's my first week back. Maybe it would be a good idea not to involve my children in their extracurricular support. So no tutors, no therapists, no extracurricular activities. It would be so much better to just kind of get back into the groove. And that is one way to approach it. But another way is just like a tent gets hooked into the ground and it allows for it to be held together, so too, the people that support your child in whatever capacity it is, when you're trying to reboot, you want that support. It's so funny. I happen to have a lot of followers who are grandparents, and the grandmothers are like, yeah, I do this for my child, I do that for my child. Do I get the credit for it? And, I love spending time with my children. Can you talk about grandmothers? Anything that is going to hook and support you would be the best thing to do in this time of rebooting and this time of shocking the system. So maybe, go that extra mile. Yes, resume the therapy, the tutoring, whatever new experience, the people that are helping to bring your child support where you don't have to do it. It's like a freebie because they're giving your child some whatever support, academic support, social support, and or whatever support it might be. And so involve them. Now's not the time to take them away. Now's the time to bring them in. So that's one kind of hook. And that's a hook for your child, but that's also a hook for yourself. You've just been on vacation, and perhaps you went away on vacation with your friends, but perhaps your vacation, especially this year, was involved with literally making sure that your kids are okay, that your kids are your kids. And maybe you didn't necessarily hook in to those things that ground you and all of your routine and your people and your hooks. So part of the reboot is making time to be sure that you rehook with those people that you care about. And in that way, you're going to keep it grounded in this amazing reboot. But there are other kinds of hooks. So let's say, the most important question that you will hear me ask again and again and again is, what's your goal? Because your goal is what really sets you apart and it allows you to then follow in what your plan is and how you're going to carry it out. So let's say your goal is for children to be social, right? You want your kids, like in this reboot, my kids, like I want them to go back into school and to feel good and to feel really like, what am I supposed to do? So one of the hooks that you could do is to help your child hook with another child. And how do we do that? So either this week, it would be great to provide games or ideas that your child can do with another child at recess. If your child is a little bit nervous about going back to school, then probably the best bet is before they go back to school. And, if we didn't have a snow day tomorrow, I would say, oops, like maybe you're a little bit late. But no, you will have tomorrow because your kid will hopefully go back to school on Tuesday. So you have a chance. Your child is a little bit more timid and hasn't really spoken to a lot of the kids in his or her class. Make that effort to have the child engage in some way with other children, either through text or through calling or through video game, whatever it might be, that will allow your child to feel hooked and connected back to school. And in that way, your child again reboots and the system gets recharged in a way that really has very little to do with you, except for the fact that you are going to be that motivational pull, right? So hooking could be hooking with yourself, hooking with the supports that you have, and then trying very hard to allow your child to hook with other people. Let's say your child is really anxious and nervous about leaving you, right? And so your goal is to allow your child to be able to separate from you in a healthy way. So perhaps a hook that you could do with your child, one of my favorite hooks, is the sticky note. So I like that you could write a little note to your child, a motivational note like, I'll be thinking of you, kisses and hugs, or remember when we were on the beach and blah, blah, blah. And you put it strategically in your child's knapsack in any capacity, right? So you could put it in the, by the food, you can put it in her pencil case, wherever it might be, so that when she finds it, and you could even tell her, when you're on the bus, remember to look in your whatever, or when you're in class, remember to look in wherever, so that your child feels hooked with you, right? So that's another way that we can use the hook. And, that goes generally for younger children. So teenage moms often ask me like, okay, so how do I hook with my child who really doesn't want to have a note from mommy saying, I love you, right? So how do we do that? So my answer is, what do your teenagers really enjoy? So perhaps it might be money for a soda, or money in any capacity, really, with like a little note that says, I thought you could use this, is your way of telling your child, like, you're too good, too good to be true, child. Like, don't worry, I've got you covered. And, I'm thinking about you also, but in a cooler type of way. So that's the H, okay? So now we have the S, the H, now the O. O is 1. So it's really important that we be good while we're reshocking and rebooting the system, that we're going to find our goal and we're going to stick to one goal. It's the one. You are one person. And so if you're going to insist on 100 different goals as you're rebooting the system, so I want my child to be social, and I really want them to do well in school, and I really want them to be able to clean their room, and I really that is way, way too many goals. Like, that's not going to happen. Why? Because it might happen, but it's not going to happen fast enough, and it's not going to happen in a consistent way that you're not going to end up feeling less than overwhelmed or upset about either yourself or your child. So not the best idea to take on more than one goal. Now, goals, they connect. Positivity grows. You get the ball rolling and you see that like momentum, things happen. So take upon one goal, and that should be the goal that you are going to appreciate and validate and recognize with your kids. The one also represents your significant other. It would be a great idea for you to both, you haven't already, but vacation is sometimes those times where you have more than one chance to talk to your significant other. But it would be a great idea to be united and one in the goal. And why? Because your children, they smell difference. They know if they could get away with it in one area and from one parent, and they're not going to get away with it in another parent. So they're going to manipulate the system. That's just the nature of the way that people are. And you're only allowing for half of the time to be generalized, meaning like if I can only practice picking up the stuff off the floor when my mother is around, and she's only around on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, then that is the only time that it's going to get reinforced, as opposed to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Okay, so it would be a really great idea to come up with one goal and let that be the goal that kind of everybody is talking about, everyone is appreciating, and it's very clear. And on a day where it's a vacation day, a snow day where people are around and there's a level of nothing else going on, it's a nice idea to perhaps recognize like this is something that is really, it's going to be great, we're going to do it, and I'll kind of get into maybe some idea of how to do it, but essentially don't take on too much. It doesn't feel good to you, and it doesn't feel good to your children to feel overpressured. And this is just not that time in your life. Like when there is a lot more time, that is when there is a lot more opportunity to take on as many things as you want. In the meantime, take on one and make sure it's something that you feel really good about. Now, there is something called the 80-20 rule, and that is it should be easy enough to do at 80% and a challenge to do at about 20%. You want your child to feel really good in what they are doing. Why? Because in that way, they will continue to do it. If they think it's too much of a challenge, meaning if your goal is not only that they, make their bed, but that they really tighten it up, and that is going to be perhaps too much of a challenge from the get-go. If your 4-year-old is getting dressed for the very first time by themselves, and you're insisting that they tie their own shoes, you're not following the way in which these things kind of build on themselves. And it's really, really important to have realistic expectations that it should be easy for them at 80% and more of a challenge at 20%. That goes for homework, that goes for sleep routine, that goes for getting dressed in the morning. Really, those are, that's kind of like one of the rules of people. Okay, so that's the O. What about the C? The C is for consistency, and that really is any system that you are going to start. And the reboot, the shocking of the system, it's a great time to just be consistent now, again, with that one goal, something that you have in mind, you're hooking with them. So how can you do it? And that really is where if you have a consistent system that is recognizable to them and recognizable to you, then you're much more likely to be able to keep it up. And that is one of the systems. You can use any system, of course, but one of the systems that I like is the flexibility points chart. Why? Because regardless of what it is that you have, and it's downloadable and you can kind of get it for yourself if you would like, but if not, there are plenty of different systems that you can create. But why do I like any system? So first of all, what I appreciate in it is that you can see it, your child can see it, and it's easy because there are certain things like 5 points and a treat. It's consistent, 5 points and a treat. One of the points is from you, where you're modeling back for them. And in that way, You tell them in advance what the treat is. You tell them in advance what the prize is that they're going to earn. And in that way, what happens is they know every time I do this, I'm going to get recognized. It's going to be written down. And surely, but very, very soon, I'm going to get rewarded for it. It's not. Kids do not buy into systems if A, they're not consistent. Meaning if your mom promises you something and then she doesn't actually give it to you and she says, yeah, we'll get to it. There's just no way, right? And if it's inconsistent, like, wait, but I did this like this many times. So how many until I get what you said 5, you said 10, like, no. Whatever it is, it should be very consistent. And on a snow day where they're not doing anything anyway, and hopefully they're in a good mood, it would be great to have an open discussion with them, and teenagers included. The only thing that changes in a system is the treat, the prize, and what it is, what the expectation is. So why is it that I started with flexibility? Well, essentially, any system that you're going to choose where you're asking a person to do something, and business people speak to me about this type of situation as well. So what happens is that they really need to be listening and agreeing with another perspective, right? If I'm asking you to do something and that wasn't what you were going to choose to do for yourself, then you have to in some way agree with me. And that is a fundamental. So flexibility, which is agreeing with someone, even though it wasn't the other person's idea, right? Agreeing with it is a fundamental building block to everything, right? If we want our child to pick up their clothing from the floor, then unless they have some sort of need to stay neat, they're going to be listening to me. If I want my child to shut off their TV and go to bed, that's a need to listen to me. So in essence, flexibility is really a fundamental principle to all systems. Now, I wanted, again, going back to the positivity, it's a pretty easy thing because they don't really understand that they're listening, or maybe they do, but it's much easier to tolerate and to handle the idea of, oh yes, you're being flexible, as opposed to listen to what I'm asking you to do right away, right? So that is a fundamental building block to all of these other systems that you will hopefully one day be able to implement. All the other demands that you will hopefully be able to impart or communicate to them. But this one is a pretty easy, benign, general one. And if they are flexible, right? So consistency would be to make sure that in advance you already arrange what it is that they're going to be earning. If it is a candy, if it's money, I kind of call it the C's, like candy, coins, all of those things, depending on the age. It's relevant to ask them because, it's interesting. I had a child come into the office and the mom was convinced, oh, for sure, my child's going to want Lego. My child's going to want Lego. For sure, my child's going to want Lego. So I'm like, maybe just let's ask. Okay. So the child's like, so I said, what would you like to earn as your treat and as your small prize and as your, and the child's like, well, for my treat. And the mother's like, candy. And the child's like, money. Like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay. And then for the prize, the mom's like, so what do you want to earn? I know it's Lego. I know. And she's like, a Barbie dream house. And I'm like, it's a good thing that we asked. It matters. If the child is putting in the effort, then it probably would be a great idea to be asking the child instead of telling the child. And communication is always key. Anytime that you take the chance to communicate with your child, sky's the limit on what you're going to get. The other thing in terms of communication is if your child is really not sure, and sometimes that's like more of an anxious type of child, like, no, I don't know, I can't decide. That would be an opportunity for you, after a while and the struggle, to give like a multiple choice. Would you like a Barbie? Would you like a Lego? Or would you like money, right? But if your child isn't that kind of child, then sometimes it just takes a little bit of time just to wait it out, to say, I know that this is a very important decision. Why don't you think about it, and I'll get back to you later. And not answer for the child, because that doesn't allow the child maximum amount of ownership. And it is a good muscle to use for a child to be able to make the decision. If you're going to say to the child, okay, so do you want a Barbie dream house or do you want Lego, as a multiple choice, when the child clearly can make the decision, again, you're cutting off the opportunity for a child to feel empowered, and it doesn't work as well. When a child owns their own decisions, you get a lot more from the child in terms of a relationship building, in terms of them buying into any sort of system. So just hold back, again, from, you want to keep it as open-ended as possible. But not for every child. Like I said, it shouldn't be something torturous where the child's like, I don't know, please. Right? No, we don't want that. But ownership is really important. It brings up one other very important principle that I'm going to make mention. And that is, sometimes we feel like we should just pave the way for our children, like just take care and handle everything. And in that way, everything is going to go well. If I wake up really early and I just prepare everything, it's going to be great. But essentially, that's not empowering our children. So when we're rebooting, we do have to consider what our role is to get the system going so that we can shock the system to get things in order, because our children can't be doing everything by themselves, obviously. But there really are 3 different sizes to a problem. There's the small problem, and those small problems children can handle by themselves, right? Like what I had just mentioned about what prize. Many children can make that decision by themselves. So if you make that decision, then you're not empowering them. You're kind of like just not allowing them to do what they are capable of doing. That's the opposite of empowering them. Right? Now, it does get bumped up to what I call a middle-sized problem, where the child did try but wasn't successful and really needs help to accomplish it. And then you want to have the lines of communication open so that your child will come to you and ask you for help. And I think that that's really important, and you want that the child does that. But then, it is not so easy. Oh, I see that there's a question going on, being asked. After my child receives his prize, he usually ends up acting up either hours later or the next day. What are ways to stop this behavior? Okay, so I think that that's a really important question. When it comes to any behavioral system, it is important that we recognize that there is going to be, that a child is going to get the prize when they do it. And the point is that they keep on practicing it enough so that it becomes part of, Chevy Fast, this is a great question, part of what it is that it's a newfound skill, right? So it's going to take a lot of practice, and the more practice that they get, the better off they're going to be until it does become habitual. But this system, for example, helps with the idea that we have to stretch the child over time. So the first level of when the child gets a prize is that they do it 5 times, they get a treat, 5 times they get a treat. But the next level is to stretch them a little more and to say, now 7 times and they get the treat. Now we want to see you do it more. We want to see you do it more consistently in order for you to get the prize. We want it to grow with you. Perhaps also, right at the beginning, the idea of flexibility is going to be for any little thing, right? I like to overdo it in the beginning so that the child builds on the positivity, right? Like, so it could be that when they're getting dressed, the shirt gets a point, and the pants get the point, and the tzitzis get the point. But then, after a week of that, no, when you're completely dressed, you get a point for being flexible and getting dressed. When you've done it in its complete form. If you don't grow with the expectation, then your child is not growing in their skill. So be careful not to keep it status quo, but we want to stretch them to allow for it to happen. In addition to the prizes, we want the verbal recognition. We want the parents to be saying, great job. You're so strong for being able to do blah, blah, blah. Or it makes me feel so close to you when you get dressed all by yourself. In doing that, what happens is that it's beyond the prize. Then it takes the form of, oh, okay, this is a relationship building. Like, I am proud of you. There's the deeper, right? The concrete reward is nice, but that's certainly not the same as the verbal recognition or the closeness or what else happens, the dynamic that happens from the positivity. So great question. Keep it up. And also know that, again, it takes time. And if you're consistent and you can consistently ride out some of these, when he ends up acting out, then, if you get through it, then, it will go a long way. Okay, so getting back to what we were saying, how that empowers. So then there's, that middle-sized problem that you are helping them with. And there are so many of those kind of experiences, and then takes to the biggest problem. And the biggest problem is when you have a larger than a parent or a teacher being able to solve it. So then it goes to the professional, and that's one that, there are other problems that we allow for children to cry and to whine and to scream that we don't allow it at the small level, because how is that going to help? Middle-sized problem, like, come to me. I mean, what do you need to be crying and carrying on for? But large-sized problem where you're hurt and, you cry, kid, cry, that's totally different. We're allowing for emotional experience, but we don't want that that's how they use it. Parents oftentimes say, well, my child was just whining. Well, if that's part of your coping repertoire, child, then we've got to redo that and recognize that, that's a nice coping tool, but it's not the one that's going to work out for you. Okay, so that is the C. That's, we have the S, H, O, C, and the last is the K. And the K is kindness. Okay, so kindness to yourself is giving yourself time, especially on the snow day. Take some time for yourself if possible and allow for you to recharge, you to have some time for yourself. Kindness, if you show yourself kindness, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a really helpful thing. It's great to model for your children too. Like, I'm taking a few moments to myself to just regroup. So that's kindness to yourself. Also the recognition, like I said before, stop making it so difficult to be successful. Don't take on too much. One thing at a time. And don't worry if your child is not going to be, successful after the prize. Like, that's okay. You're in the process. You're doing so much. You are trying. And if you're trying, then that counts. That matters. So we have to be kind with the messages that we send to ourselves. I'm trying. I'm doing. Yes. So I didn't take 17 of the hours on the snow date to play with my child. That's okay. I'm allowed to take a small amount of it. And then I can do other things. Like, that really works. That is okay. Then there is, kindness towards the child. And that's where, sticky note comes in. That's where praising and just spending some extra time with your child really comes in. You know how your child is handling, perhaps how they're handling going back to school. If they are nervous, like I said, that sticky note goes a really long way. If it's more about sending in recess activities, that goes a long way. If it's about a child not knowing okay, so I'm really nervous about how I'm going to do in school, this next semester. So sitting down with them, talking about it, just being able to say, okay, you know what? Let's start the tutoring right away. Or, is there a particular subject? Or maybe it would be good to recharge in a different way. Children are not just about, and I know that they're going back to school, and many of your children are good at other things besides class. So kindness is also connecting the dots for them about, I know that school is starting, but so is your art and and just recognizing that with school, like maybe we should try to organize the way that the week is going to go so that we really build in more time for the art or the music or anything else that goes a long way. Or kindness might be, I wasn't going to do play dates this week because we just started, but I see how important that is to you, so I think it would be a great idea. Let's see if we can organize something, right? And then there's also the kindness of giving back to others. And that's really where I am so excited about 24/7. It is an amazing initiative that I'm going to be talking about, that many important people on their Instagram accounts are talking about. And Bracha Jaffe is doing this amazing debut song that is going to be coming out. Like, kindness by giving to others. So the 24/7 is really about supporting the organization that takes care to provide food to people in the hospital. So when they come visit, and it's just like, it's what they do and how much effort they put in is so great. But I know, especially from a lot of teens that I've worked with who did involve themselves in other things, it kind of like just takes off the all about me and puts it on in a fun way. Like, especially when, there was a couple of teens that had this challah bake that they were doing, and it bonded them together. And then it also just allowed them to de-stress a little bit onto something that is really so great and so exciting. So it's never a bad thing to involve kindness in what you do and in what becomes part of the reboot and the reshocking. And I think that is, something else that really, really goes a long way. And so for any question that you're going to have about 24/7, that is going to, be coming up more and more and more over the next couple of days, because I think the actual launch is on Wednesday. So that is really great. One of the questions that has been asked that I should talk about has to do with, yes, okay. So it has to do with, what do I do with regard to siblings fighting with each other on a snow date, or on any day really. And so if we go back, like, let's just think about for a moment, what it has to do with is what's the goal? So this parent was saying that the goal is just to get through the day. Like, I just don't want all the fighting the whole time. So one of the ways that she was saying is that, some kids like to play with each other and some kids don't. And it depends on the age and it depends on the situation. But when you're structuring, right, when you're structuring the day, it might be helpful to have time that the children are going to be able to play with each other, and where they'll also have some alone time. So, if it's all about all day, just, disorganization, that's fine, because, everyone's in the house, then there is a much greater likelihood that people are going to argue with each other. But if people have like their space for at least some of the time, and I know, having worked with a lot of the older of the siblings, so the older child likes to have space. The younger child might like it too, but in many ways wants to be perhaps with the older exciting child, because there's a lot more excitement that can happen. So one of the suggestions that I have is make sure that each child has the opportunity to do what their goal is for the snow date, and then take it from there. So if they want to, be able to play with their sibling, that's fine. But it also helps a lot to be able to have downtime by themselves. And just like you want downtime for yourself, it goes a long way in preventing some of the fighting if you just like separate them out. Now, that is a hard thing to do, but especially outside where there's a winter wonderland, and that is something that is a built-in entertainment for a lot of children on a snow day, especially when they're in the house by themselves, where they're not going anywhere else. So the winter wonderland outside is a really great time to allow for separation. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can have a snowball fight, Or you can have on two ends a snowman competition where you give them, scarves and mittens and whatever, a couple of stuff, and you give them, some props, and you say, okay, you have this amount of time ready on your market, set, go. Your guys are going to, build a separate snowman, and that way, we're going to have a snowman competition. Or you can do it together and say, okay, guys, I want to see the best snowman that you can. If it comes out good, there's hot cocoa for everyone. There are two different schools of thought when it comes to siblings. One is separate them out, and the other one is unite them with a common theme and a common goal. Many families, I often suggest that you have a common way that you're working towards a prize. It was interesting, just last week, one family that I work with, they had been working towards getting the trip to Orlando. So it was great. They had, a flexibility chart for each one of the kids, and they had to tally up the points. And if the kids hit a certain astronomical number, then the family was going to be able to go to Orlando. And they were able to. Now, mind you, the parents gave a lot more of the points than necessarily than was earned, because winter vacation was coming up. But it really allowed the children to bond because everyone was working towards this amazingly agreed upon goal. And so it really is a great idea to have some of the time that you have a united goal. And in that way, the kids are bonding together because they all want the same prize. Other times, kids really do need time by themselves. And if they are going to share a room, that is a hard thing. But even a time rotation where you take the other child, or that you set up the other child with something else, and everybody else, and so that one child is allowed free time in their room. And honestly, it's really appreciated and it goes a long way. And so that is another way to prevent, sibling issue. Essentially, the more that you draw attention to the positive that you have with the children in the family, the more they continue it. And so if you're going to draw attention either through a united goal or through just, this is so important that I'm going to take the time to be with one child so that you take, so that you have your free time, that really reinforces an amazing, amazing positive that will allow your children to feel like this is important. And when they feel that this is important, that really makes a difference. Okay. Are there other questions, comments? Let me see. Okay. This is another question that had come up before, and that is with regard to how do I get my child to get dressed in the morning when they are really fighting me? So this goes to the kindness element. This is one of my favorite kindnesses. Now, again, it depends on the age, but this is for younger children. But I have something called the hanger rule. And the hanger rule is that if a child is doing the 80%, right? So let's say they got up and they are agreeing to put on their shirts or their pants, something. And then they just kind of like peter out a little bit, then I don't mind picking up the other 20%, right? If they're doing their shirt and their skirt, then I don't mind doing, their tights or their socks or their shoes, something like that, the 80-20 as a hanger. Or that all throughout the week, if they do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, then on Friday, they just act like a hanger. They stand still, and I literally get them completely dressed, or I advise that they get completely dressed. So in that way, it's kind of like a natural reinforcement, right? Sometimes a child, like I had this mother who was telling me that her child, they were getting into it, they were doing great, and then all of a sudden what happened? They had a wedding and then the child woke up and would not get dressed. And I'm like, no, this is a hanger moment. Your child's been doing great. You don't have to worry like, what's going to be. This is the moment where you say, you know what? I am so proud of you for getting up in the morning. Stand, just as long as you stand, I will do the rest. That's the kindness, and that's what I call rule, tool, connect, right? So the rule that we had been reinforcing for a long time was my child gets dressed by themselves, right? The tool was reinforcing, giving positives, and just making sure that it happened. But the connect, like the relationship, is that sometimes it goes beyond the rule and the tool. That's the hanger goes beyond. They didn't really earn it, deserve it, whatever. No, but I did it anyway. Why? Because it's all about my connection. So if my child doesn't feel connected to the idea that like, wait a second, I just had a wedding. I'm so tired. I haven't had the same amount of sleep. No, that's the time. We have to be able to not only follow and consistently do the rules, because rebooting and recharging is totally making sure that we are consistent with our rules. And then, as I've been mentioning, we have a lot of tools to use. We can reinforce with a chart. We can be positive. We can insist. We could say, first you do this, then you do that. We can know a lot of what we're going to do with our children. But the bottom line is the connect, right? It's all about what we do, even with our significant other, in our businesses, in our classrooms. If we don't have a connection, then what do we do it for? Like, what does it matter? Like, how is it going to get me through the next situation? Like what we were saying, well, what happens with the next situation? Well, the next situation, you're going to be right back to where you were before because you don't have a connection. A connection allows you to have an opportunity to generalize, that your kids trust you, that they're going to talk to you about it, that they're going to work on it, that they're going to buy in. So just make sure that when you're rebooting and you're shocking the system, that you're shocking it in a way that has the rule. Make sure that we support the tools, but really important is that we maintain that connection. And by doing that, any situation it's all going to be the same. So a couple of you actually have asked me about Rule Tool Connect. So I'm just going to mention it like as an example, right? So the rule is we make the bus in the morning, right? And that's going to be a struggle as we're rebooting and we're taking in the, thank you, Hannah, 1634. We're making the bus in the morning. Okay. So that's it. We're making the bus. So how do we do that? So one of the ways, and I don't think that we've mentioned this, but one of the ways to reboot is to make sure if you're going to get sleep, right? So you can sleep a little bit longer and a little bit more soundly, knowing that you did whatever you could the night before. So what do I mean by that? So if you can organize or have your child organize the clothing in advance or the snacks or the knapsack, like really try as hard as you can to get it together. Why would you want to do that? Well, you'd want to do that so that it's organized, right? So that you can reach your goal of being able to get all of your children onto the bus in the morning. Okay, so we have the rule and we have the tool. The tool is organized. We might also have to have another tool, which is what? Like, I'm going to reinforce it. I'm going to use the flexibility points like every time they do. Okay, so that's important. What is the connect? So the connect is that sometimes, like I said, we might have to do the hanger. We really might have to, make it so that your child in those moments are going to still get on the bus, even when there was a wedding the night before. We might also, if you see that, oh my goodness, like this is just not working. My child is exhausted. They studied for a test and they're just not doing it. That might be the one time that you do drive your child to school. Maybe. Okay. If you can. Not saying that you should, just saying, again, that's in the connection. Maybe it goes a long way in the flexibility chart and being, instead of saying, you're going to get 1 point for each time, but I'm connected to you. I understand where you're coming from. So I'm actually going to give you 2 points today, double the points. Why? Because honestly, like you're really having a tough time and I just want that it should go well within a connection. Right? So that would be an example of Rule Tool Connect that I've been asked. Another thing that I've been asked is, well, let's see. There's a rule of going to sleep by 9 o'clock. Okay. How do I consistently use the rule tool Connect when it comes to sleep? So the rule in the family is by 9 o'clock, we go to sleep. The tool is, like what I had said, 1 hour before, like by 8 o'clock, there is no electronic on. Not only that, we start the organization and everything knowing that we really want to get into a consistent sleep routine early enough so that it should be able to, do what it's got to do. Okay. So if that's the case, then where is the connection? Okay. So the connection might be that if my child does go into bed by 8 o'clock, let's just say, and is bored, because now nothing is on, that I then say, you know what, let's spend like quality time. Can I read to you? Let's talk. Let's maintain more of a connection. That it's not just, okay, great, we got it done. Like, okay, but I'm going to use that time for us. Like, that's something that's very special to me, right? The sleep time can be really special. It could also be that, that we get extra reward, again, in the flexibility, that I'm recognizing it. By doing that, really, what am I doing? I'm maintaining a connection with something that is going to go well beyond the rule and the tool, right? And in that way, what happens is I have something that's so much bigger than just that my child went to bed on time. Now, as we started off, it is really important that our children go to bed on time. It is also really important that we go to bed on time, because the stronger we are, the more, like I said, we have our time to be able to have the 3 seconds to make the right decision in how we approach and what we say to our children. But be that as it may, there still is something just more important than even that. And that really is the connection that we have, because that just, embraces and encompasses and takes on the challenge of the next situation and the next situation. And in that way, really, we are much more capable of dealing with any situation that comes what may. All right. So more questions, please. More comments. Okay. All right. So someone wanted to understand, again, the sticky note situation. Okay. So when we're talking about kindness and hooking with our children, one of a beautiful way that we can do it, and there are some people that actually do sticky note Monday, because Monday, we are going back to school. Well, not tomorrow, thanks to the snow, but in general, we are going back after a lengthier period of time. And but Mondays are really, unless you have Sunday school, then you are, half a day on Friday, then there's Shabbos and Sunday. So Sticky Note Monday is really an opportunity to hook with your child. And so just a little note that you hide somewhere that your child will find that will allow for them to feel like, oh, okay, mommy still loves me, and it's an okay time, not to be with my mom. For those children that kind of have a harder time going back. Another way that we use Sticky Note Monday, not every child needs their mother or their father, but some children do need a motivation to get through the week. And it's not the easiest thing to know when your child is one of those children that literally dreads being in school. And it is it's a challenge, because, you feel badly, especially after, a break where they're able to really shine and feel good, and then they're going back to school. So another way that you can use sticky notes is to come up with, let's say on, the night before the week, and be like, okay, so we've got Monday. What are we looking forward to on Monday? And we write it on the sticky. Okay, Tuesday. What do we have to look forward to on Tuesday? And let's say they can't come up with something, then this would be a good time to either help them to come up with something, or create something. So it'd be like, okay, so maybe you'll have, let's put together your favorite lunch. Or, you can have an extra half an hour of whatever. Or, this would be a great opportunity for, I'll pick you up from school or whatever it might be, so that really that your child does have what to look forward to for the whole week. And it's nice to see it on stickies, all the way again, written out. There are some children that are more visual, and there's some children that are more auditory. And what does that mean? There's some children that when you write it out for them, they totally get it. They see it, and seeing is believing. There's some children who really need to hear it. And so if you're going to have a conversation with your child, be like, okay, so what are we going to, okay, so let's talk about what Monday's going to be. And like, you don't actually write it down. It takes away if they're a visual child. People, like I said, they ask me all the time, so why a mnemonic? So a mnemonic for me is a way that I can chunk it. But if I didn't also write it down, then I wouldn't really be able to see, okay, so SHOCK. But by writing it out, it also allows me to be able to conceptualize it. Children, when they're younger, they don't necessarily know, oh yeah, I'm a visual person. Now, sometimes they do. Especially the arty ones, you can see, okay, what, it's kind of obvious, but, adults have a better chance of knowing what type of learner and what type of way they take in information in the world. Kids, not so much. So we do have to pick up on it. So for right now, that's why we want to maximize by talking it out and also by visually for them seeing it, which is why, again, anything like a chart, what it does, like if your child is visual and they didn't know it and you didn't know it, at least you're maximizing the opportunity that they have to be able to remember it and hold on to it. So that would be another way to use sticky notes. So I hope that was clear. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Go Be Society, for being here tonight and allowing me to go out of my comfort zone and joining me tonight. And this was really, I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that your systems will be shocked and rebooted. And, please feel free to send in additional questions and comments. All right. Bye, guys.